Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm an alcoholic named Judy. And I'm so grateful to be here. I have to admit, I was a little intimidated when I agreed to speak at this meeting. I think this is, or at least has the potential to probably be the biggest meeting that I've ever spoken to. Fortunately, I don't have to see everybody. So, and I don't know, my just went off. Got it. All right, I just lost a little power there. I'm hoping that this is going to be a smooth sailing. If it's not, we'll deal with it, right? You know, when I first logged on to this meeting, everybody's laughing. And it kind of reminded me of my first impression of the meeting that started my sobriety. And the thing that I will always remember about that meeting is that it was Sunday morning when I was usually horribly hungover, if not still intoxicated. And there's all these people, and the whites of their eyes were white, and they were laughing and joking. And it was almost a shock to my system, because I realized later when I thought about it, that I hadn't laughed in such a long time. And I probably hadn't heard anybody laugh. And that was where my drinking took me. I had been isolated. I didn't know what to do with my life other than to drink. I had, for a long time, not considered alcohol to be a problem. I considered it to be a solution to what I viewed as my many life problems. I think I learned to drink, as they say, at my father's knee. As far back as I can remember, my parents drank every day. They were the 5 o'clock cocktail hour crowd. They and their friends. That's what they did. And it wasn't always at 5 o'clock. There were notable exceptions to that. But and you know, I remember that as a little kid, and as I grew older, it was just part of life. It was a ritual, just like you go to church on Sunday morning. You know, there are things that you did regularly, and of course, I didn't see anything wrong with it. But, and of course, I didn't know about alcoholism. I didn't know that it was a disease. I didn't know that it was progressive. But even today, I can't say that my parents were alcoholics, but sure looked like it in retrospect. I think my father died at an early age as a result of his drinking. And things did start to change about the time we moved to Florida when I was in 7th grade. I think it was about 13. And I think it was after that, and maybe that was a geographical for them. I hadn't really thought about that, but it likely was. And things started to get a little rough after 5 o'clock. You know, my father would yell, and my parents would fight, and my mother would cry. And it hadn't always been that way. But, you know, knowing what I know now, I see that there was a progression over years. And, you know, what's kind of ironic and really crazy about it is that even as that was going on, I wanted to drink. And I had never had a drink at that point. But it kind of started with my buddies. I always had a group of buddies that liked to do things risky and different. And so when we got together at about 13, 14 years old, we didn't really have any freedom, but we would get together and decide that when we when we had a sleepover at somebody's house or party, we would all bring something that we had pilfered from our parents' liquor cabinets. And, it was, I remember there was a bottle of blackberry brandy that I knew my parents had never touched. They were Scotch drinkers. And so that was my contribution. And most of the contributions weren't really much better than that. So it was kind of an early initial effort to see what alcohol did. But as I got older, and the craziness in my house kind of got worse, I remember vividly one day, in the middle of a big fight between my parents, I took the bottle of scotch off the kitchen counter and poured it down the drain, with my father standing behind me, yelling at me and almost crying, like, please don't do that. It was, it's very vivid in my mind. I thought, I don't know what I thought. Maybe I thought that I was going to fix this, but I didn't. Obviously, it didn't make a difference. But I started to have the opportunity to drink more as I got older. I knew people who had fake IDs. I knew people that were old enough to pass for 21. And, there was a time when I could say that what I really wanted to do was just be able to drink as much as I wanted, whenever I wanted. And I was about 15 or 16 when I started to feel that way. And it was easier to do that. And I was having blackouts by the time I was a senior in high school, maybe earlier. And I thought that was cool. And I thought everybody had blackouts. And probably some of the kids that I hung out with did. I do remember getting together after those events, parties, and kind of filling each other in on what crazy things we did. And we thought it was hilarious. But, at the same time, I did okay in school. I knew I was going to go to college. I thought that was okay, not because I had any really great desire to higher my education. But I knew that there was a lot of partying in college. And so I chose to go to a college that had that reputation. And I had a really good time. That was my first year. I had, the only thing that was wrong, honestly, during my first year was that I had a boyfriend who was at another school. And I think that's when my codependency really started to kick into gear. And, I can kind of recognize in retrospect, as we do, that when I started drinking seriously, my judgment, you don't have much judgment when you're a kid anyway, but I made some really bad choices and bad decisions that have stayed with me. I left the college that I had gone to for the first year so that I could be with him. And before that second year of college was over, I was pregnant. And in those days, what you did was got married, which was not a good choice. But, that's what my parents seemed to think that I should do. And I had this crazy idea that, little house with a picket fence or some damn thing. I don't know what I thought. I just thought that would be great. I thought we would be happily ever after. Surprisingly, not so. Yeah, that marriage, for whatever it was, lasted about 2 years. During that time, I have to say, I don't remember drinking very much. And I think it was because we were dirt poor. We, a 6-pack of beer would have been an extraordinary expense for us. I'm not saying we didn't drink, but it was something that just really wasn't. And I was really thrilled with my daughter. She's one of the best things that ever happened to me. Later I had a second daughter, another great thing that happened to me. But that marriage was over, and without much fanfare. I called up my father. I said, I can't do this anymore. He had said to me, I'm going to go to California and ride the waves. That was his level of maturity. I said, what about me? What about our daughter? And he said, well, maybe when I get a job, I'll send for you. So I shared that with my father. And he immediately found me a lawyer. And as I recall, that divorce was over in a heartbeat. There really wasn't anything to fight about. And here I think I was 21 or 22 years old. And I was back at my parents' home. And the only condition for me to come back and live with them was that I had to go back to school. And my parents were very big on education. That was something that was just there weren't going to be any ifs, ands, or buts about that. And I thought that was a good idea. And I had I didn't have anything else going on. So I did go back. I had to commute from Fort Lauderdale to Miami because there wasn't a college in Fort Lauderdale then. And it was an hour commute each way. But I was very, very serious about getting through. I didn't do much dating or partying. I just went to school, came home. I worked part-time for my father. And, my thinking was that, when I get out of college, I'll get a job and I'll get an apartment and, everything will be great. Well, didn't really work that way. That was, I don't even remember when that was. This was late 60s. And I had got my degree in business administration. And I thought I was going to get a great job. And when I applied for jobs, they said, and how fast can you type? And do you by any chance take shorthand? And that was the career opportunities that I had then. And that did not financially permit me to pursue my dreams. So I continued to live with my family. And, during that time, I finally did get a job because I could type. And I had taken shorthand in high school and I had a good memory. I didn't know much about shorthand, but I had a good memory. And I could always write a good letter. I could write a letter better than my boss who dictated to me. But around that time, my father got sick. He got cancer. And he was given a death sentence. He was given 6 months to live, which was just about how long he did. And during that period of time, I started drinking with my mother. He was no longer able to drink, but she had the daily drinking habit. And I was sad. She was a wreck. She was trying to take care of him. And I think that's the first time in my life that I ever drank for anything other than just party purposes. I drank just to cut out reality. And, I guess I was reasonably successful at that. And I had a job that I didn't particularly like, so I got to go to work every day. And my mother was very glad to have somebody to come home to talk to and drink with. And, then my father passed away, and I kind of woke up to the fact that here I was young, I was still in my early 20s. I had a built-in babysitter, and I found out that some of the people that I worked with loved to drink, and Friday night was party time. And so for a couple of years, that was my life. I worked all week. I came home Friday night. I did not come home. Friday night, I went out, and truthfully, sometimes Saturday morning, I didn't know where I'd left my car. It just, it was just one of those periods of time where drinking really accelerated. And then I got to the point where I was doing that during the week. And something in me knew that this is just crazy. I would stay out until the bars closed at 2 a.m. and go home and sleep for a couple of hours and get up and be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning. I think about that now, and I can't believe how horrible that was. I mean, and I know I felt horrible, but I was just obsessed and continuing to do it. And of course, there were guys involved. And then I met my soon-to-be second husband. And he was in a situation kind of not unlike mine. He had moved back home with his parents, who happened to live next door to my mother. Just meant to be, right? And I found out that not only did he like to drink, he liked to smoke pot too. We just hit it off. We were just like that. And the only hitch kind of was that this was very late 70s, when it was during the Vietnam War. And he had been married and had, therefore, some of you remember this, some of you are younger and you don't remember this, but he was draft exempt as long as he was married. But he had also gotten married when he was like 18. And then they got divorced. And as soon as he got divorced, he got a letter from Uncle Sam. And so he had decided that rather than being drafted and being sent to Vietnam, that he was going to enlist in the Navy. And that's what he did. And they gave him a deferred admission type. So we had about 6 months that we partied and talked about getting married. And he got to know my daughter, and, seemed, what could go wrong? Seems perfect, right? We did get married. And he did very well in the Navy. He started out as an enlisted man, and immediately they put him in officer training school. And so for about 3 years, we bounced around from one coast to the other, to here, there, and everywhere. Had another kid. He was not home a good bit. I was kind of left to my own devices with 2 kids. And I kind of remember during some of those, we were stationed at one point in Niantic, Connecticut. And I was a Florida girl. I mean, I wasn't born in Florida, but I had grown up in Florida. I didn't know how to drive in snow. I didn't know what snow tires were about. I didn't know anything about living in the winter. I still don't, but I did live there while he was away. He was on a submarine, and long winters. And I remember during that period of time, there hadn't been a whole lot of drinking. Just wasn't kind of part of the lifestyle. But I was lonely, and I was stressed. And I started kind of obsessing over drinking. And, I felt like I shouldn't, because I was responsible for these two children. And I knew I wasn't a kid anymore. And so I made a deal with myself that I would only drink on Sunday evening. And every Sunday evening, I certainly did. Those are the kind of controls that I guess made me think that I had control over drinking. I had my first daughter 9 months after we were married. I was pregnant again. I had a miscarriage. Nothing, he was not there for the miscarriage. I don't know. It was just not, it was sort of a dark time in my life. And that's when I remember really, really wanting to drink. And I just allowed myself that one Sunday night, I would open a bottle of wine. And I would, in my mind, the bottle of wine was supposed to last for like 3 Sundays, but you know what happened. I know who I'm talking to. You guys know how that goes. And, eventually the Vietnam War was coming to an end. My ex, he's my ex now. He always knew that he wasn't a military career type, and thank God for that. I knew that too. And he was given the opportunity to leave early. So we returned to Fort Lauderdale, where we both lived, where we had met. And came back where he went into business with his father and his brother. And they were very successful, actually. We started to live really well. We were able to buy a house. A couple of years later, we put the kids in private school. Beyond our wildest dreams in terms of material things. Should have been happy. I told myself that a lot. Should be happy. Look at everything I had. Eventually, he did so well that we bought a house on the beach. As an aside, I have to say that these past few weeks, I have thought, if that hurricane had hit on this coast, that house could have been underwater. And I always thought about that too, because I was always a little bit afraid. Because it was gorgeous house. It's, I don't know, Zillow says that house is now worth $4 million or something. I don't know. I didn't feel like I was living in a house like that. Yeah, of course it wasn't worth that then. Anyway, I really wasn't happy. And I didn't know what was wrong, but I thought I didn't know about depression. I didn't really know about anxiety. My husband spent a lot of time working. So I decided that I needed to, I tried to find a job, and I couldn't find anything. I didn't know really what I wanted to do, but there was a relatively new law school that had opened in the area. And I decided I'm going to apply to law school. I'm going to become a lawyer, because that will help. That will make me happy. And in truth, there were problems in the marriage. My ex-husband was not an alcoholic, but he did like to drink. He had other addictive qualities, I would say. Things just didn't didn't pan out the way they were supposed to in my mind. And I don't think they panned out the way he thought they would either. We had over a period of probably 10 years, we had split up, lived separately, moved back together, done that over again. Each time alcohol became more and more necessary for me. And I think I learned later that during that time, I really suffered from clinical depression. But again, I didn't really know anything about that. I just knew that I needed alcohol. But, you know, I guess it was my parents' 5 o'clock drinking ritual that kind of always stuck with me. I usually didn't drink until 5 o'clock. I didn't drink in the morning, although there were so many mornings that I thought, God, if I just had a drink. Because I was hungover practically every morning. And every night, pretty much I knocked down a bottle of wine or whatever. And I did that for a while, but I did finish law school. Kind of a miracle. I did during the period of time that I was in law school. I said to myself, you can't drink while you're going to school, because I knew I could not. You know, most weeks I lost a day. Friday night was the big drinking night. Saturday, I couldn't function. I knew I couldn't do that. And so that was my rule. When I was in law school, I didn't drink. And I didn't, except during vacations. When we had a summer vacation and we had a Christmas vacation. But, you know, that sort of impeded the progression, I guess you would say. And what it really did was convince me that I had control over this thing. And I could point to you, well, look at this, I didn't drink during this time. You know, I didn't have a conversation with other people. I had that conversation with myself. And, you know, the first time that I really recognized that alcohol was not doing me any favors was probably around 1984. I graduated from law school in 1980. I had a couple of jobs. They never really worked out for me. Probably alcohol's had something to do with that. But so this one weekend in 83, 84, could have been 85 even, I don't remember. I had really tied one on, and I woke up the next day. He wasn't speaking to me. I didn't really have much of a memory of what had gone on, except I know it wasn't pretty. And I thought, I was confused. I thought I was crazy. I really thought that I had sort of lost it. And I kind of knew that drinking was part of it, but I really wasn't quite ready to acknowledge that. But, you know, and this is really part of my story. I had learned about Alcoholics Anonymous in a way that, again, maybe some of you who are my age or in that generation remember the Ann Landers columns in the newspapers. Yeah. And my family were big newspaper consumers. You know, my father read the sports section and the news, and my mother read the women's section, and my sister and I read the funnies. And I always read Ann Landers, even as a kid. I don't know why. And very often, or so it seemed to me, or I was always interested in these letters about people who drink too much. You know, either my husband drinks too much, or my wife drinks too much, or I drink too much, and the advice was always the same: go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew that. I knew without a doubt that if I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, I would stop drinking. I didn't know anything much more about Alcoholics Anonymous, but so I did. I called up intergroup. I said, I think I need to go to a meeting. I was put in touch with a lovely woman. I went to a meeting. I met a woman there who she wasn't really a sponsor because she was pretty new too. But we went to a meeting every morning at 11 o'clock and did that for a few weeks. And, you know, I would like to say that during that period of time, I recognized that I was an alcoholic. I think I said I was an alcoholic, but I didn't really believe it. Everything that I heard there convinced me that I was not an alcoholic. That, I heard people talk about, about drinking when they got up in the morning. Never did that. I heard people talk about, drinking a fifth a day. No way. Everything I heard, I said, that's not me. I'm in the wrong place. And so I said goodbye to my friend. And I said, I think I have some problems that I need, but I don't think it's alcohol. But I fully intended to not drink, but that time it didn't work. I continued to drink, and I drank for another 3, 4, 5 years until it really got rough. And the last night I drank was one of those nights where I couldn't get drunk. I just couldn't drink enough. I couldn't pass out. I decided that night that the next day I was going to go to AA. And it wasn't because I wanted to get sober and become happy, joyous, and free, because I thought that was BS anyway. But it was because I had made a decision that the only thing for me to do was to kill myself. And but I knew that I couldn't pull it off. I knew I was going to screw it up because I was bloated all the time. I just couldn't think clearly. And I was aware of that. And I also wanted it to look like an accident because I didn't want my kids to have to deal with a mother who committed suicide. I wanted it to be an accident or something. So I thought, just my insanity, I thought, okay, well, I know if I go to AA, I can stop drinking. That was never questioned. Thanks to Ann Landers and her sister, Abby, if you recall. And so I did that. And it was not with the idea that I was going to get sober and have a better life. It was that I was going to somehow be able to hatch a plan that was going to enable me to off myself, hopefully without hurting myself, because I didn't ever want to hurt myself. And, I have to say that AA got me. I went in there and those people were laughing and they were happy. And there was a little teeny bit of me that said, maybe I could be that way too. And so I went to the next meeting. I went to another meeting that night. And I had the phone number of the woman that I had talked to the years before. It was written in my big book that I had put on the very top shelf of the bookcase. And I took it down and I called her. And she said, I said, do you remember me? And she said, oh yeah. So I'm sure she didn't, but she, maybe she did. Maybe I was so screwed up that she did remember me. I don't know. But she met me at a meeting, and, kind of the rest is history. I continued to go to meetings. Somewhere along the line, I think what happened is I just got little doses of hope. Not great big. I never really thought, okay, everything's going to be wonderful. It was just maybe I did it a day at a time. It's the first time I ever heard that you could live your life a day at a time. But a day at a time, things kind of got better. And I got through some really difficult things. I finalized a divorce. I lost my home. I had to find a place to live. I had to give my dog away. It was a hard time. There was no pink cloud, but I felt strong. And it was only because I had the wonderful people in this program who held my hand, who stood behind me, and told me things were going to get better. He told me, don't quit until the miracle happens. I had a great sponsor. I got through it. And about 3 years in, I hit a wall. And that's when I started. I found that I was one of the ones that needed outside help. And fortunately, I was able to afford it. I was encouraged by my sponsor and all of the wonderful women in AA that backed me up. I went to a therapist. I went to a psychiatrist. I got all of that outside help. And I do believe that I needed that before I could ever truly find the miracle that is this program. And I am so grateful today. It's, I can hardly find the words to express it. I was so hard-headed. I was so sure that I was able to control. I wanted to control everything and everybody. I had a really, really hard time with the God stuff, with the higher power stuff. But I had a sponsor who had been a nun, and I said, I don't know what to pray for. I don't pray. I don't know what to pray for. I don't know who I'm praying for. She said, just get down on your knees and pray for willingness. And I did. And sometimes I still have to do that. I will have 35 years sobriety next week, October 25th. I still remember those tough days, but life I have been given so many gifts, so many gifts. Not the least was the opportunity to work for a lawyer assistance program where I was able to share my experience, strength, and hope. I was able to help other lawyers who suffered from not only alcoholism and addiction, but other mental health concerns. I was able to use all of my experiences, good, bad, and indifferent, to help other people. And that's what's kept me going, and it still keeps me going. I retired from that job 2 years ago. I miss it terribly. I really do. Retirement during COVID was not the greatest plan I ever created, but I'm getting used to it. I'm sort of getting used to not having to get up and go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. But, speaking to this group has been great. I want to thank Stephen, who asked me to speak. Stephen and I reconnected after a couple of years. He was also involved in lawyer assistance programs. It's how we knew each other, and a mutual recovering friend kind of put us back together. And he invited me to speak at this meeting. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do that. I see some old friends here. I see a few people that I haven't seen in a long time. Thank you, Stephen, for asking me. Thank you all for listening. And I wish you all many wonderful days in sobriety. Thanks.